Hey everybody, it's Vicky. Welcome back to my channel. I'm going to be doing another vlog. And for that vlog, I have my trusty wine cup. So I don't know if you know what that means, but in case you have forgotten or you are new here, this cup means that I am doing another episode of the 100 Epic Reads, which is the series I'm doing on my channel where I'm trying to read and scratch off the books on my 100 Epic Reads poster. It is this poster that has 100 books that apparently everybody should read or something like that. And as you read them, you scratch them off. And it reveals a cool little cover. It's very fun. And I so far have read about half of them and I want to read more of them. So I've made a decision to do a vlog series here. And this is the third one. So the first time around I read Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. Last time I read The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. And I don't know what we're going to read this time. The way that I'm going to do this, I started doing this the last vlog. I'm going to pick 2 books out of the cup and I'm going to choose one of them to read and vlog it for you. So the books, I should say, on the poster are mostly classics, which is good. Some of them are very intimidating to me. Some of them I have never heard of before in my life. Or I've heard of, but I still don't know what they're about. So it's gonna be fun. So I'm gonna pick 2 right now and see what we get. Let's see. I always like to do 2 colors. So let's see. Let's do, I want a blue one. Give me a blue one. Okay, we got blue and orange this time. Okay. Big breath. Let's see what we get. I always get a little nervous because, like I said, some of these books are intimidating. Okay, first pick. Here we go. We've got The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. This is one of those books that I have seen all over the place. Like, it's one of those books that's just always at the bookstore and I have no idea what it's about. So let's pull up Goodreads like I always do and find out what The Alchemist is about. Okay, so I've got it pulled up on Goodreads and it has a 3.89 average rating and has like 2 million ratings, so lots of people have read this book. And let's see, what is it about? This enchanting novel has inspired a devoted following around the world. This story, dazzling in its powerful simplicity and soul-stirring wisdom, is about an Andalusian shepherd boy named Santiago who travels from his homeland in Spain to the Egyptian desert in search of a treasure buried near the pyramids. Ooh. Along the way, he meets a Romani? Wow, I am so uncultured. A Romani woman, a man who calls himself a king, and an alchemist, all of whom point Santiago in the right direction for his quest. No one knows what the treasure is or whether Santiago will be able to surmount the obstacles in his path, but what starts out as a journey to find worldly goods turns into a discovery of treasure within. Lush, evocative, and deeply humane, the story of Santiago is an eternal testament to the transforming power of our dreams and the importance of listening to our hearts. And how long is this book? Let's find out. 182 pages, so it's a quick one. And I mean, it sounds interesting, I guess. It's not totally like grabbing me, but yeah. All right. I want to see what the second choice is, just, you know, in case. So, okay, we got the orange paper. Second choice, second option is oh boy. Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. Okay, funny story about this. I actually read, I don't know if I read all of it, but when I was in Spanish in high school, like the last year that I took Spanish, which was my senior year, I feel like we spent the entire year reading this book in Spanish. So we would like read it and then translate it. And that was like our whole year. But I still And I've seen the musical that's based on this, but I still don't really remember everything that it's about. But what's interesting is I believe that The Alchemist was originally published in, was it published in Spanish? It's a translated work. So let's look up though, Don Quixote. Why not? So we can get a synopsis for this guy. Okay, so Don Quixote also has a 3.88 rating, so they're basically about the same rating on Goodreads. Not at nearly as many ratings though. Not as many people have read it. Okay, let's read about what it's about. Don Quixote has become so entranced by reading chivalric romances that he determines to become a knight-errant himself. In the company of his faithful squire Sancho Panza, his exploits blossom in all sorts of wonderful ways. While Quixote's fancy often leads him astray, he tilts at windmills, imagining them to be giants. Sancho acquires cunning and a certain sagacity. Sane madman and wise fool, they roam the world together, and together they have haunted readers' imaginations for nearly 400 years. So this is an old one, guys. With its experimental form and literary playfulness, Don Quixote has been generally recognized as the first modern novel. The book has been enormously influential on a host of writers, from Fielding and Stern to blah, 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 blah. And if I remember right, it's very long. This Penguin Classics edition is over 1,000 pages. Oh boy. So my options here are, do I want to read a very short book or a very long one? Both are about adventure and such. I gotta think about this, guys. Am I up for the challenge to do Don Quixote? Or do I want to take the easy way out and do The Alchemist? Decisions. All right. I have decided that I have kind of been taking the easy way out, or at least I did last time, because last time I picked a short book and a very long book, and I went with the short book. And this time, I'm gonna go for the long book. I'm ready for it. I'm gonna do Don Quixote, guys. I don't know. Like I said, I'm a little bit familiar with the story because of like seeing the musical. I think the musical's called Man of La Mancha, and I thought it was fun. And yeah, I think pretty sure I read it in Spanish, or maybe part of it, so I'm gonna give it a go. Yeah. Don Quixote. Let's go. All right, so I'm gonna work on getting an edition of the book because it is available for audio on all of my platforms. Because it's a classic, they're usually easy to find. But I want a physical copy too, in case I wanna read along, or I might try to start physically and see how that goes. This one's gonna take me a while, guys, but I'm ready. I'm ready for it. So once I get the book and all that, I'll give you guys a check-in. All right, guys, it's happening. I got my copy of Don Quixote. This is the vintage classics edition, and it's translated by Edith Grossman. I got this one because I just think the cover's cute, this little illustration. But I wanted to get an Edith Grossman translation of this because thanks to Benjamin McEvoy, I believe is his channel name on YouTube. He does a lot of videos about reading classics and how to approach certain books and stuff, and he had a whole video about just the translations of Don Quixote, and then also had a video about like how to read Don Quixote. And I found his videos to be very helpful. I will link them down below in case any of you guys decide you want to read Don Quixote and want some info. Like, they're really insightful, really good videos for that. So, but that's why I picked up this one, because he recommended Edith Grossman. In terms of her translations, I guess, from the Spanish tend to have hold on to the humor of the original text and in the actual like Spanish. So I decided to go with it. So this edition is 940 pages. But after watching Benjamin's videos, am a little bit more excited about it. Like he's kind of got me amped up, like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna do Don Quixote, I can do this. So yeah, I am ready to start. My plan, I'm going to be reading this very slowly. So like you guys aren't gonna see this video for probably a couple months. Cause I'm reading it starting it way ahead of time because I know this is gonna take a while. And so I'm planning on starting small and maybe trying to read 15 to 20 pages a day. So you do the math, 940 page book, it's gonna take me a while. But that way I can really just sort of take my time with it and really, if I need to, really go in and kind of deep dive into stuff, watch some more videos, read the Spark Notes, whatever I need to do to really make sure I'm getting everything out of this. Because if I'm gonna dive into this book and read this book, I wanna make sure I get everything I can out of it this go around. So yes, I am ready and I'm excited. So yeah, I'm going to be starting and I will let you guys know my initial thoughts once I actually start it. Hey, so we had quite an adventurous morning over here. We had to take Hunter to prop care because we had to make sure he didn't need to get stitches in his head because he was walking with one of those giant pencils, you know, that you get that are, you know, kids love them. And luckily it had a plastic cap on it, but he was walking with one of those and he went to walk into the bathroom and he like bumped the door jamb and it caused him to basically jab himself like right here with the pencil. And it was gushing blood and it was horrifying for me, very traumatic. And yeah, it was bleeding really well. And because of like where it was in his hairline, we couldn't really tell if it was like gaping or whatever, or if it was just like a puncture wound. We didn't know what happened. So we took him and luckily he did not need stitches or anything. It's just a cut, but it just bled really good for a cut and he's fine. But that was my morning. So it was a great time. But I wanted to do a check-in because I have been reading Don Quixote and haven't done a check-in yet. So I'm on page 152, which in the grand scheme of things isn't very far, but and so far it's interesting, but I am a little bit curious as to how this story is going to continue on for another 700 pages, to be quite frank, because it basically deals with a man who reads a lot of stories about chivalry and knighthood and things and basically decides he's going to be a knight and goes about the land trying to do knight things, and everybody thinks he's crazy. And there's this guy who is kind of his sidekick. His name is Sancho Panza, and he kind of goes along for the ride and just sort of also takes part in these adventures, if you will. And it's just interesting because I'm glad that I did go with this Edith Grossman translation, because now I know what people meant when they said that there is like humor in this story and that she really still captures that in the translation, because there are some humorous parts in here. And I'm talking even like bathroom humor, like what a lot of people would consider like very crude. We're talking like puking or like pooping. I mean, sorts of humor. That it's just funny to read, knowing that this book is so old and that was in there. And yeah, you just kind of keep going along with these two, and they keep getting into these situations where Don Quixote basically like starts fights with people, or in some cases objects, and basically gets his ass kicked every time. And just keeps going at it though, because he's a knight, damn it. So it's just interesting because I guess it's entertaining, but like I said, I don't know how it's going to continue going on and on for this long. But when I do sit down to read it, it actually isn't a difficult read, surprisingly. Though there is a lot of footnotes and stuff, because it references, the text references a lot of stories that are about chivalry. And so the footnotes often deal with that. But yeah, as far as like the themes go, I'm still kind of trying to figure that out. I mean, because like I said, you have this guy who reads a lot of stories and obviously gets super inspired by what he's reading and wants to do this stuff, and everybody else thinks he's totally crazy. And he just keeps doing it. Because even at one point in the beginning, like, he gets so beat up that he has to be carried home, basically. And there is a housekeeper, I think, in his place, and then there's a priest in his area, and they basically go through his house and they take all of his books and they burn them all because they're like, this is the problem, this is why he's doing this, we have to get rid of these books. And then, you know, he'll snap out of it. Well, he doesn't. And so I don't really know what that says, what it's supposed to be saying about that. And then there are a couple instances too so far where there has been like an aspect of storytelling where like somebody else is telling a story, and in one way or another, the storyteller is criticized, or the storyteller, it turns out the storyteller is telling the story wrong. So again, I don't know if Cervantes is sort of like critiquing oral storytelling, oral histories, and kind of saying that the written word, the written stories are the superior. I don't know. Like I said, I'm still trying to figure it out, but so far I have to say it's entertaining. It is funny. Don Quixote, I'm not sure if I am quite endeared to him yet, but I do like Sancho. He's just like along for the ride. He's just kind of like, he's like kind of the guy who's like, I'm just here for the snacks. Like that's Sancho. Like he's just chill and just kind of like, okay, I'll do this. Sure, why not? You know, or whatever. And just for the most part, it's just pretty chill and laid back. And obviously like he's there because Don Quixote promises him a bunch of stuff. Like, oh, if you come along with me, like I will give you land. You'll become a lord or whatever, and all this stuff. So Sancho buys into that. It's like, okay. But yeah, that's all I really have to say so far. As I continue on this journey, I will check in and give you guys my thoughts. Okay, so as you can see from the previous little montage, we decided to take the kids to Legoland because we've never been before, and it was all right. The kids really liked it. It was, I think though, for the price, I felt like there wasn't a ton of stuff to do. I don't know. It was okay. And of course the kids at the end in the store, they each got a Lego set. So we'll probably be building those eventually soon, very soon. Hunter already wants to build his. So yeah, it was a good time. It was good to get out and do something, especially today was a really like rainy, yucky day. So it was actually like the perfect day to go do something like that. But I'm here because I have something to report. I am officially at like the halfway point of Don Quixote. I just finished part 1, so you know, that's basically halfway. And so it was interesting, like I feel like for it being, you know, just the first part is about 450 pages, so it's one of those reads where you're like, you feel like when you look back on it, not a lot happened, but actually there was a lot because it's a lot of stories within the story. So basically like they're kind of, Don Quixote and Sancho are on this sort of adventure, and then they meet all these people along the way, and then like these people in one way or another share a story, tell their own story or whatever. So it's a lot about storytelling. But the way it kind of ended, I can see like, I don't know, I feel like it would have been kind of a little bit of a downer for it to end this way, the way it did in part 1. Because part 2, so what I'm going to be reading next, wasn't published until I think it was 10 years after the first part. So there's quite a gap between the two, but he basically wanted to do a second part and was working on it, and then somebody else basically tried to like plagiarize him and do a part 2, and he was like, no, 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 no. Don Quixote's mine. And then he released part 2. So I don't really know what part 2 is going to be about, if it's just going to be more of the same, or if it's going to take sort of a different direction, if it's just more of like Don Quixote wanting to be a knight and Sancho along for the ride, or what the deal is. And like I said, it's hard to believe that I'm already 450 pages read in this. It's just like, I think it's because I've been taking it in small doses, so it doesn't seem as overwhelming or as like bogged down, because it is a pretty easy read. So yeah, that's really all I have to say. I would say at this point, at the halfway point, this is probably a 3-star read. It has its funny moments, its enjoyable moments. Some of the like stories within the story kind of stuff was interesting. Some of them were not so interesting. So yeah, I don't know. It's all right. I don't love it. I don't hate it. It's right in the middle. So right now that's pretty much what I'm sitting on, but who knows, if part 2 blows me away, maybe I'll change my mind. But I mean, like I said, I'm not hating it enough where I don't want to go on. So I'm going to go on, and we'll just see where the story takes us. I have done it. I have completed Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. I feel like $1 million, honestly, because this thing was huge. Okay, and it's just such an accomplishment. And in case you guys didn't like notice the timeline, I started this book on February 15th of this year, and today it is May 21st. So it took a very long time. I ended up reading roughly 15 pages a day was like my goal, but there were days where I only read 10, kind of like depending on where the chapters kind of broke up. There were days I didn't read any because I was, you know, trying to finish other things or whatever. So yes, it was a very timely process, but I'm actually glad that I read it that way, that I kind of broke it up into such small increments, because it did make it more digestible. Though I have to say, towards the end, I was like, okay, I just want to finish this book because it has been so long. And I think that since I never did an update, and I apologize for that I never did an update when I was kind of like midway through part 2 of this book, I think like initially, like at the halfway point, I would have probably said that part 2, I was enjoying it a little bit more than I did part 1, only because like in part 2, they're kind of like back at it again. Don Quixote is out there doing night things. He's got Sancho with him. But in this one, it's more like, it's weird. It's weird because the first part of the book, like I mentioned, there's a lot of like storytelling, people telling their stories about, I don't know, whatever's going on in their life. And it felt like a lot of times Don Quixote wasn't actually super present because some of these other characters kind of were in the spotlight more, talking about themselves. Whereas in part 2, he was definitely like the central character, and anytime that even anybody was kind of telling him a story or, you know, something like that, he was an active like participant, listener, talking to the person. So he just seemed more present in part 2, and I kind of liked that. And I liked that he just seemed I don't know, to me he was a little more endearing in part 2, because in part 1, he's just like doing all this stuff and like attacking people and like attacking objects, and it's just kind of off-putting. But in the second part, he seemed to just be more like wise. And so I liked Don Quixote more in part 2. And Sancho also had like a lot of growth by the end of the book, and I really liked him. He was definitely like a favorite throughout the entire book, but I really liked kind of his story arc as well. The thing is though, part 2 ended up being kind of sad. Like the ending made me sad. And I'm not gonna like spoil it for anybody, but it made me sad for 2 reasons. One is obvious if you've read the book, but the second way, the second reason was kind of like just the sort of evolution of Don Quixote by the end. I don't know, it made me kind of sad. So I think my feeling on this is, I'm thinking I'm gonna rate it like 3.5. Because my overall enjoyment, it was good. For it being so long, I didn't really hate it. But I don't know. It just sort of, I wasn't like totally in love with it, but I didn't hate it. And so for me, that's always like a 3-star read. But I also want to kind of give it a little more than a 3 and maybe bump it to a 3.5 because of just like the significance of this book, because it is such a well-known classic, and one that so many people like reference and say was inspirational to them, and it's considered one of the first novels of like modern times and stuff. And so like I just feel like you have to give it a little more than a 3. And honestly too, I thought the overall tone was good. It was very satirical at times. It had some great humor. Even reading it in 2022, I feel like there were definitely parts in it that made me laugh. So it like kind of shows you kind of the timelessness of this book, and how, you know, people reading this in the 1600s and laughing at it, and we're still laughing about it now. I mean, that definitely says something. And then what was interesting too about part 2 was there was a lot of like references, and like it was almost like meta, because in real life, I think I mentioned, part 2 was written 10 years after, or was published 10 years after the first part. And basically Cervantes published part 2 because somebody else, another writer, was basically trying to write a sequel to Don Quixote and like passing it off like his. And Cervantes was like, no, like this is my baby. And so he references that attempt of that author to write a sequel in the book, because in the part 2, all the characters are aware that a book has been written about them and their adventures. And then they also are aware that this kind of like imposter sequel was also, tried to be put out, and they talk about it and they reference it. So it's kind of interesting to kind of like have that in there. But yeah, overall this was enjoyable. I liked the themes because it does talk a lot about like honor and loyalty and kind of like perception versus reality. It had some fun adventures in it. Like I said, it was funny. Would I read it again though? Probably not. Though I'm glad it's one that I can check off and say, yes, I've read and yes, I enjoyed, but I don't know if I would ever dive into this again. So yeah, I think it's gonna be a 3.5 for me. And I highly recommend, like I said, reading this book in small increments. Like, I think I averaged it was probably 1 to 2 chapters a day was what I probably ended up being. And I think that was a good way to take it in. And then I also referenced the Spark Notes. Like, every time when I would go to sit down to read this every day, I would open up Spark Notes and read the chapters that I had read the previous day, just to make sure that I was like understanding what was happening, even though it wasn't difficult language and it was pretty easy to follow. I just wanted to make sure I had everything down. And so I kind of did that too, and that was very helpful. So I recommend doing that as well. As far as audio goes, I never listened to an audio version of this at all. It was all physically read. So I can't really recommend an audiobook, but I bet reading along while listening to an audiobook of this would also be fun. So yes. Overall, this was a pretty good experience. I'm glad that I read this because if not for my 100 Epic Reads poster, I might not have ever picked this up. So I'm kind of glad that I did. So yes, I'm gonna put this down because it is hurting my wrist. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed this installment of my 100 Epic Reads vlog series. I will be coming back at you soon with another one. I'm really curious to see what I'm gonna pick next. I'm hoping it's not another chunker. I need a little bit of a break from the big books after reading this one, just for a little bit. So, all right, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know down below if you've read Don Quixote and what you thought of it. And yeah, that's it. I hope you guys have a great week, and I will talk with you soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.